And then I'll just disappear whenever I'm finished and let you
Yeah. Take your time,
talk over.
Carola, because
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Hello. You are very, very welcome to our Center for Behavior Analysis, Queen's University webinar series. Today, we're just delighted to be celebrating Autism Awareness Month. And to help us celebrate, we have Professor Karel Pančocha here with us from Masaryk University in the Czech Republic. Karel and I have a long history of working together for many, many years. And over the recently, he is the director of the Institute for Research in Inclusive Education. This is a dynamic department which derived from closely cooperating with the Department of Special and Inclusive Education at the Faculty of Education in Masaryk. Karel is a BCBA doctoral, and as I said, we have been working together for a very long time. And today he will be talking to us about shaping autism care in the Czech Republic, which will be very interesting because it's kind of very symptomatic for how autism care in Europe per se is shaped quite a lot anyway. So I think it would be very interesting to have to listen to the historical perspectives and the political influences. So Karel, thank you so much for being here today with us. And I'm going to leave you to it. And anybody who has any questions, please ask your questions in the question box at the bottom, and we'll come to those after. Karel will be talking around about an hour, and then we'll have time for questions after that. So over to you, Karel.
thank you very much. Thank you, Carola, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for inviting me. I will be talking about autism today, but also about the services provided to individuals with disabilities, including autism, in the Czech Republic. And I'm taking a little broader perspective at the beginning of my presentation, and then I'll go a little bit narrower. I just would like to say that I'm not a native English speaker. My native language is Czech, so English is my second language. So I would like to apologize for any mistakes or mishaps. That's probably or most certainly going to occur. But I hope I will be understood most of the time. If you have any issues understanding, then let me know. I can clarify any specific part of my presentation, and hopefully we'll have a chance to discuss some of the issues at the end of my presentation. So, okay, let's start. The content, what I would like to talk about today. First of all, I would like to locate myself a little bit in our Center for Applied Behavior Analysis and tell you a little bit about the part of the world that we are operating in. And then I'll move and talk shortly about the history and the political perspectives on disability that are related to this area in the world, the Central Europe specifically. And I will not be talking specifically about autism in that part because autism just is part of the topic. And during history or during the 20th, most of the 20th century, autism was actually not recognized as diagnosis or as a state of a person only until the end of the 20th century. Then I'll talk specifically about autism and the history of autism in the Czech Republic, and I will focus on screening, diagnosis, education, and specifically then on early behavioral intervention. So let's start. First of all, where is this country? Well, we are a very small place, a little bit smaller than the state of Ohio concerning the size, and about the same population. So we are located in Central Europe. This map, I think the green actually shows the countries of the European Union. It's a bit older map because UK is still there. Don't worry about that. Prior to 1993, the country was called Czechoslovakia, and you probably, or definitely people from the United States would probably still remember the name under the old name. And then the country was divided peacefully into two independent republics, the Czech Republic and the Republic of Slovakia. And so this is where we are located, next to Poland, Germany, Austria, and Slovakia. So just to make the geographic situation even to look even closer to where we are, you can see in the middle of my slide the name of the city that we are located in, BRNO, Brno. That's where I am now, and that's where our university is and where our program in behavior analysis is located. This part of the world has been shifting borders throughout the last centuries. So maybe about 110 years ago, you would not have any of those countries there. We would be part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, much bigger country that has been then divided into some other countries at the beginning of the 20th century and reshuffled again towards the end of the 20th century. So even though you live in one place, in one city, you can end up in a different country quite easily. All right, and to get located even more, Masaryk University is the second largest university in the country. We have almost 40,000 students, so it's a very large institution. Second, the largest in the country is the famous Charles University in Prague. Brno is the second largest city, so we are always competing with Prague. And here's a picture of our town square. So I hope that locates us quite well. I would also like to mention that the European Behavior Analysis Conference will be held in Brno this year, September 4th to September 7th. So you are all welcome to visit and participate if you can. All right. So let's have a look at the 20th century and the turmoils and changes in this country, and look a little bit on focus on disability. And because my background is in education, I will mostly be relating my talk in this part to educational or social care. Okay, so the first half of the 20th century in the country, at that time, still the Austria-Hungarian Empire, and shortly after the Czechoslovakia, was actually quite unique time, very progressive in a sense. And even though some of the words I'm using here are the words from that time, like remedial or special schools and so on and so forth, at that time, it was quite radical thought that people with disabilities, including people with intellectual disabilities, including people with autism, should actually be educated. That was quite radical and not very common in Europe at the time. So in 1896 already, in Prague, the first so-called remedial school was found. We would call it today probably a special school. And that school at the time was the first institution or educational institution that was actually teaching children with intellectual disabilities. And that group of children must have included children with autism at the time, because there was no specific segment or specific group that would be called people or children with autism. Interestingly, the school was established even though the law on special schooling was not in place. That happened later on in 1925. I'll talk about it a little later. So already what we can see here, that action or like teachers willing to teach children with autism, special needs, intellectual disabilities, were ready to do it even when they did not have the legal background. In 1909, the first Congress or meeting of remedial schools was held in Prague again, and that was already quite large event where teachers of children with special needs met and held the first conference. This was followed by the first law on special education, which established the system of special schools throughout the country, and that happened in 1925. So some almost 30 years after we actually had the first schools established. The 1920s and 1930s were pretty positive in a sense that those times really saw a large development of special schooling. I'm using the word remedial here because that was the word of the time. And in the 30s, special assessment, special textbooks, or teacher training actually for teachers who should teach children with intellectual disabilities were put in place. The teachers and the teacher training was actually an extra training. You first had to become a teacher of elementary or primary school, and only after you had your licensure in teacher training, you could then go and upgrade to the licensure for the remedial or special school teacher. As I said, autism was not recognized at the time, probably nowhere around the world before Kanner's description of autism in the 1940s. And people with autism were considered or fell into some of the categories of that time. And the two categories that they would probably fall into were either the category of so-called morally defective people. There was a category of people that would somehow show problem behaviors, aggression, truancy, these kinds. Or in the second group, which was called at that time the group of feeble-minded, we would call or call the group today people with intellectual disabilities probably, and children or adults with autism would fall into these two categories, but would probably be educated in the special school system, but would receive some kind of elementary or basic education and followed probably by vocational education. These positive developments were unfortunately stopped by the Nazi occupation and Second World War during the late 1930s and especially 1940s. What you can see here on this map is actually the map of the Czech Republic, and the yellow areas are actually areas that were first taken by the Nazi Germany, and only first they said like we are taking only this land, no more, because that's the land where there is some German population living, so this should become part of Germany. And only a year later the Nazi would occupy the rest of the country. It reminds me a little bit of the current situation in Eastern Europe, but this talk is not about the current events. So we are I'm back in the topic of disability and this very unfortunate time for people with intellectual disabilities, especially with mental disorders, and definitely not recognized, but including the individual with autism. The German Nazi regime had established a special program which was called the T4 program. The T4 was an abbreviation for the street where the building where the program was set up in Berlin, the Tiergarten 4, that was the address. So the T4 program comes from Tiergarten 4 abbreviation, and there was a special program within the Nazi Germany and also the occupied territories that was focused on uh, making people with disabilities disappear, especially focused on people with intellectual disabilities and mental disorders, that they were typically either relocated from their housing to very unsafe environments, or totally neglected, or actually many thousands and thousands killed in special units of psychiatric hospitals where they were simply put to death. So from the rather positive developments we see in the 1930s and 1940s, very dark times for people with disabilities, including people with autism. This time, the end of the Second World War, was followed by the establishment of the communist regime within the Czechoslovakia, or now the Czech Republic, which has been also rather unfortunate time for people with disabilities. They were not killed or put to death or relocated into some neglected places anymore. However, the communist regime, which was running the country between 1948 and 1989, was really focusing on the healthy person who could manually work and support the system, support the government, support the development of the regime. And people with disabilities did not fall into that category of the full, happy, healthy, hard, physical, manual working person. So they were more or less pushed on a side of the society. I have some pictures here, like you see the young children coming to the leader, all healthy, good looking, and we see more. There is an advertisement for young persons to come and join the workforce to build atom shelters for the possible war or conflict. So you can see that people with intellectual disabilities, with autism, or with any kind of disability would not fit into this picture and would not be recognized as valuable citizens for the country's politics. Okay, the communist era concerning education of children with mild and moderate disabilities, they were educated in, again, self-contained schools, put aside of the general schooling. Children with more moderate and severe disabilities, where children with autism would mostly fit, were generally institutionalized and officially recognized as non-educatable. That means they were, once the medical doctor would proclaim that they are not capable of education, they would not visit any school. At that time, parents were officially encouraged by physicians or other professionals like social workers to so-called surrender their children with disabilities to institutions. And those families who decided not to do it, they were provided no services. So a family with the child with disability had a choice. They could keep the child and take care of the child without any support, or give the child to the state, and the state would take care of the child within institution. That means that people, especially with the intellectual disabilities and autism, would live their whole life in residential institutions that were typically located outside of the urban areas. Very interesting um, or peculiar thing is that when the communist regime took over the country in the 1940s, they confiscated most of the land and property from people who were rich. That means also people who owned castles, who owned big buildings. So the government ended up with a lot of property. They had not very much use for the property. So somebody probably decided that the good use of that property would be housing of people with disabilities. So what you can see here on this picture are some of very beautiful chateaus in this country that are typically located somewhere in the nature, usually quite far from other buildings or cities or towns. And those were confiscated or taken from the original owners and used as institutions. So one could say, like, wow, people with disabilities would live in these mansions, but those houses were very poorly maintained, and people with disabilities lived there totally segregated from the rest of the society. I think the pictures show what in what areas those places were located. And unfortunately, many people with special needs in the Czech Republic still live in these properties. We have had the deinstitutionalization movement here since the early 21st century. However, that movement has not been so strong to let all people with special needs to leave these institutions. So we still have approximately 6,000 or 7,000 people with disabilities living in those large institutions even today. Okay, 1990s, so the end of the 20th century, has seen a tremendous change in the way how people with special needs or disabilities started to be treated, especially because of the change of the government. The communist or the communist government has been dissolved. We had so-called Velvet Revolution, where the government officials were just thrown away from their positions, and we have became democratic republic. And since that time, we still are. In 1992, we had a new constitution written. For the first time, Article 33 actually said that there should be a free, appropriate education for all. Colleagues from the United States probably know that movement of free and appropriate education for all. So we have established or adopted this movement in 1992 within our constitution. And for the first time in the history of the country, that meant that actually all children have a right to be educated, and people could not be proclaimed as unfit for education anymore. So in the 1990s, then we had a lot of people coming back to education, even older people with special needs, with disabilities, actually receiving education for the first time. In 1991, the system of so-called special education centers, or we could call them counseling centers, was established throughout the country with 111 centers around the country that actually deliver assessment, counseling, and inclusion support for people with disabilities. In 1992, also the law for the first time allowed inclusion for children with special needs. However, at that time in 1992, with the exception of people with intellectual disabilities, including children with autism. At that time, autism was not a specific category. People with autism were still part of the intellectual disability group. So, Constitution says free appropriate education, but that at that time meant special education for children with autism and intellectual disabilities. Only in 1998, classes for children with severe disabilities were approved by law, and actually only in 2002, the school inclusion for children with intellectual disabilities and autism was approved. So only how much 22 years ago we have had children with intellectual disabilities and autism entering the regular schools and having individual educational plans and so on and so forth, as you know it. So the development probably similar to other countries, however quite late compared to some Western countries, United States or the UK. Okay, let's continue. In 2004, the School Act, for the first time, the least restrictive environment was enacted. And for the first time, children were supposed to be placed in the mainstream school as the preferred placement. In 2005, that was followed by the Social Service Act, where people for the first time receive the financial support to purchase services. So before 2005, concerning all the social services, including housing, residential, daycare centers, early intervention, all those services were available, but people had to search for the services, and it was actually on the service if they would take them or not. While since 2025, the services are like small businesses, because the people with disabilities receive the money themselves and they go and buy the services they want. So they are not kind of assigned to a service anymore. Only in 2011, the schools, or I mean the mainstream schools, were for the first time obliged to educate all children from their community. Before 2011, the school could easily push away a child with a disability by saying, we don't have the resources, we don't have the expertise, we don't have the right teachers, we don't have behavioral support, and in this way exclude a child and push the child towards some special school or homeschooling. Since 2011, that is no more a choice, and the school has the obligation to take care of any child from their community. And since 2016, this is the latest development, children are not placed into schools according to their type of disability anymore, but according to their support needs. We have 5 levels of support needs. A child gets assessed in the special education center and receives one of the 5 levels of support needs. And based on the level of support needs, the school has to provide, but the school also receives funding from the regional government to to actually have that support in place. Support needs can include, for example, teacher's assistant that would be like a second teacher in the classroom, special textbooks, special equipment, training for the teachers, all kinds of supports. Okay, so that was a short, well, not so short, but an overview. 20th century, it's 100 years. So I've been doing that in 20 minutes or so of the situation and support or non-support or neglect of people with disabilities within the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, then following by Czech Republic. However, I think the situation is very similar to many adjacent countries, Slovakia, Poland, Austria, or others, especially the very positive developments in the first half of the 20th century, then followed by the dark times of the Nazi and the Second World War, where thousands and thousands of people with disabilities were killed, followed by the communist regimes where people were considered as less as a second-hand citizens of the country because they were not able to fulfill the myth of the healthy worker supporting the government, and followed by the positive democratic changes and establishment of services at the end of the 20th century. Okay. Let's have a look at specifically at the situation of autism. As I said, for many, many years, autism was not recognized as a diagnosis. People with autism were not recognized as a specific group. And the data that I have here, you probably all know, this is the data from the Center of the Disease Control, from the ADDM, results of the ADDM study that's done in the US every 2 years. 2023, we have the situation that 1 in every 36 children, which is approximately 2.8% of children of 8 years old, have signs of autism. And I want to use this data to compare with the data in the Czech Republic that are not very, let's say, trustworthy. We have some data from the healthcare systems, and data are rather peculiar. We have asked the healthcare statistics office to give us some information about the number of individuals with autism, which is considered the F84 diagnosis within the International Classification of Diseases. And health statistics gave us the information that there were 25,976 records of these diagnoses received within the system in the years 2010 to 2018. Very strange number. We really don't know what to think of it, because this is every time somebody is, for example, checked or goes through a diagnostic procedure, that record would be recorded in the statistics of the healthcare system. However, we have no clue about the results of those tests. So we don't know if, for example, a person who went through the diagnostic procedure actually received the diagnosis or not. The school system also has some statistics, and the statistics says that about 4,200 children with ASD diagnosis were participating in the primary school system, which would actually mean that only 0.5% of children that are educated within the primary school system have an ASD diagnosis, which is way below the data coming from the United States or elsewhere in the world. So we know that there are some children with ASD who are missing from this statistics, and they are typically hidden under different groups of disabilities, typically under the umbrella of intellectual disability, or they are simply not diagnosed, and they entered the school system and they survive there even without any formal diagnosis. The estimates from the autism organizations in the Czech Republic say that approximately 100 to 200,000 individuals have an ASD, and these estimates are just extrapolation of the data coming from, example, from the United States, so or the international, the World Health Organization. So we only take the percentage and kind of divide the population of the country by this percentage. So more or less, I have to end up with saying that we actually don't know how many children with autism we have in the country, and we don't know how many individuals with autism live in the Czech Republic in total. So they are all estimates and pretty rough. So a little bit about the history of autism. Autism was not officially recognized until the end of the 20th century, for example, in the school system, in the healthcare system, not until the very late of the 20th century. However, we have had already some publications on autism in the 1960s, and actually the first book on autism, which the first book in the Czech language on autism, which was called Extreme Solitude, and you can see the cover of the book and the author of the book here on this picture. In the 1970s, from the medical doctor, Dr. Nesnídalová, who unfortunately was alone and the only person, the only professional who was writing about autism, trying to treat individuals with autism, and the others from the medical field or any other field were not recognizing the work of Mrs. Nesnídalová. So the Extreme Solitude is maybe a good title, because she was also extremely lonely in her endeavor and in her writing about autism at that time. I had a chance to read the book, and interestingly, she also writes about the treatment on autism, and she actually has a paragraph about Lovaas and about behaviorism and behavior interventions in her book. It's just a couple of lines, and nothing really major, but it is included there. So she was definitely up to date with her knowledge about the possibilities of interventions at that time. All right. It was only after the government change where civic societies and NGOs could be established. And so shortly after the government change, we have had the first organization of parents of children with autism found. It was called the Autistic Club. And also the first special classes for children with autism that were finally approved as an independent type of education. So people were not considered, or children were not considered as having simply intellectual disability anymore, and they could enter specialized programs. And in 2000, the first Association for Support of People with Autism, and a large organization similar to Autism Speaks, for example, in the United States, was found, as well as other institutions. Only after 2000, for ASD was actually recognized within the school legislation as an independent category, and started to be actually recognized and diagnosed within the system of the international classification of diseases at the beginning of the 21st century. So let me now move a little bit to the present and to have a look at how children, especially children with autism, are recognized in the country today, and how the treatment or education and social support works. So I would start with screening as like the step number one. This is the domain of pediatricians or children doctors, that medical doctors that take care of children in this country. And maybe a little older research that is probably still very valid, or the results are still valid, that says that approximately 87.5, or we could say almost 90% of children later diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders had symptoms of ASD already in their first year of life. I believe this is still true, and that's why many countries have introduced early screening of autism, as well as we did in the Czech Republic. Again, quite late, in my opinion, and it was enacted actually only in 2016, and actually the guidelines for the pediatricians were published as late as 2019. The guidelines say that this procedure, screening of autism, should be done in pediatric wards or by pediatricians. They should be done during so-called well-child visit. I don't know if this is a good English translation, but those are the specific times or specific age of a child where a child with mom or dad are supposed to go and visit a doctor for a visit to check if the child is developing physically and psychologically well. Also time for some inoculation, some shots. And so the 18-month child visit was chosen as is done in other countries for the screening of autism, and pediatricians were asked and partially also trained to use the MCHAT screening test. And in case the test is positive, then they are supposed to prompt and refer the child and the family to a proper diagnostic examination and to early intervention or care. So this is a theory, or in theory, this should be done. We did a research on that and published in a journal called Pediatrics for Practice, or Practical Pediatrics. And in our research, we have asked the question, how is ASD screening actually done in the Czech Republic? These are some of the results. What we did a face-to-face interviews with pediatricians with 210 quota sampling. We had a quota sample that was done according to gender, age, and the region where the pediatricians are working. And we found out that even though they have the obligation to do the screening, about 25% of the pediatricians said that they're just not doing it. Another 20% said that they are doing it, but using so-called clinical examination, which in reality means that they are just looking at the child and kind of examining the child or assessing the child with their, let's say, clinical guesses or experiences. About 27% were using interview with the parents, and only 27% were actually using the MCHAT screening test as the tool for autism screening. Then we also ask, like, when they did the screening, the correct time where the screening should be done is the 18-month visit. Approximately 40% of pediatricians were doing that there, but you can also see that quite substantial group of pediatricians were kind of leaving that check for later because they thought that it is too early and the signs of autism will not be visible that early in the life of the child. And then when the screening test was positive, or when the screening was positive, they are supposed to be referring the child to a psychiatrist. However, we can see that some pediatricians, or many pediatricians, were actually not referring the child anywhere, but just like waiting, monitoring the child, or repeating the assessment, and only about 30% were referring the child actually to the diagnostic testing. So that was the reality in 2019. Hopefully it is a little better. Maybe we will do the screening or the interviews again in the future. Concerning the diagnostics, which is the next procedure, and that's the domain of child psychologist and child psychiatrist in this country. And again, this is a research done by a Czech neurologist who also works in one of the ASD diagnostic centers, and they have found out that from the first signs of ASD to a diagnosis, the average time that elapses in the child's life is 51 months. It is a little older research. Hopefully the time is a bit shorter now, but my guess is that it would not be much shorter. Again, we looked at the question, how is diagnostics of autism done in the Czech Republic? And we and Slovak psychiatry. We looked at, or we were trying to find out, which should be an easy question, but was not so easy question, who is actually eligible to conduct the diagnostics of autism, or the diagnostic examination. What you can see here is actually an official letter that we received from the Ministry of Health, which says that there are 4 professions that have the right within the Czech legal system to assign the diagnosis of autism. It can be a general psychiatrist, child psychiatrist, clinical psychologist, or clinical child psychologist. So these 4 professionals can actually officially give the diagnosis of autism in this country. And we were also looking on how is this commonly done. Most of those professionals are using what is called a clinical examination based on personal and family medical history, observation of the child's behavior, and interview with caregivers. That means their own kind of opinion on autism. The use of diagnostic tools, as for example, the ADOS, is limited. It is used, but it is limited because of the cost of the diagnostic tool, which is approximately 90,000 crowns, which is approximately $4,000, which is a lot of money. And in this country, with the income of the psychiatrists, many of them would not buy and would not get trained in the ADOS and would rather rely on their clinical observation. Okay, so we are now moving from the diagnostic procedure to the educational current state of the education for children with autism in this country, which is the domain of teachers and special ed teachers. What we can say is that, or what I should mention or stress out, that early intervention, like for example, early intensive behavioral intervention based on behavior analysis, is not provided in this country throughout the educational field, because all programs within the field of education start only after the age of 3 of a child. So anything earlier than 3 falls under the umbrella of social care and social services. So only after a child is 3 or older, the school system kicks in and children get assessed within the special education centers, which are the counseling centers, where they get an educational assessment, and they also are navigated with their family into a type of placement, like where will they be educated. In the rare situations, but it's still an option, children with very severe cases of problem behaviors may end up actually at the psychiatric hospitals and stay there for quite a long time. Another option for schooling or the school age would be special schools for children with intellectual disabilities, with classrooms for children with autism. Then another option would be special classes within the mainstream, within the special schools, or mainstream schools. So actually, based on the assessment of the special education centers and based on the decision of the family or the caregivers, a child will be assigned to one of those places for education. The school programs. The school programs are typically so-called eclectic approaches. I would call the eclectic approach as a mixture of everything possible that the teachers have ever heard somewhere or seen from an older colleague. The TEACH program is rather prominent in this country. It was brought to the Czech Republic from the United States in the early 1990s. However, it was profoundly changed, and I would say it does not look like the original TEACH program anymore. The ABA-based programs are very rare, and there are no certified or any kind of ABA professionals working in the school system as of now. If you would go to a special school or a special classroom for children with autism in the Czech Republic today, what you would typically see is a classroom that is heavily based on the so-called structured teaching system that has evolved from the TEACH program. So you would see a special places, cubicles, where individual children with autism would be seated. You would see very structured, kind of like a boxes with activities that are supposed to be done. What you can see here is also some kind of a time schedule for the activity or for the day. So very much structured way of education, the structure of time, structure of activities, structure of sequences. That is the base of the current system of education of children with autism. What you would also see in every school for kids with autism would be heavy use, I would say overuse of activity calendars, structures, where every step that the child is following in the school day would be on a Velcro, and child would go like step by step and fulfill the activities of the day. Heavy use of the so-called transition cards, where a child would move from one station to another station only when the child is given a card which she or he needs to carry with her. So a lot of over prompting, I would call it, and no fading out of prompts. The whole system is based on prompting very simple tasks and kind of locking the kids into these structures. Social services, those are outside of the school system. They deliver early intervention. However, you should not see early intervention as the early intensive intervention, but a system where a specialist visits the child at home for an hour or two every 2 months, and other social services, including supported living, supported employment, personal care, will be done throughout the social service system. And another part of the social system is the social security, which I will skip or talk very shortly about, so we still have time to talk about the early behavior intervention. That actually the social security system delivers the social allowance or disability allowance to people, and then they can buy the social services from with this money. But I would say the payments are very low and only for very basic services. And let's move to the last part of my presentation as we are closing the hour. Early behavior intervention in autism spectrum disorder, which is the domain of behavior analysts in this country. However, research from Salmon and colleagues that has done research through Europe has found in 2016 that only 8.6% of children within the Czech Republic were receiving any kind of behavioral interventions. So over 90% of kids with autism did not receive any intervention on the behavior side. That's why we have looked at how early intensive behavior intervention is provided within the Czech Republic. There is another article we published on that topic. And I would like to sum up with the fact that behavior analyst is the person who is providing this service, and behavior analyst in the Czech Republic is actually a legally recognized profession. It's a profession within the healthcare system, within the allied health, since 2016, with the great help of colleagues from Northern Ireland who helped us to establish the training and the profession. Behavior analyst in the Czech Republic needs to have a master's degree in psychology or special education, and only after the master's degree goes through an accredited course, which has 420 hours, typically 5 semesters and 1,800 hours of practice. As you can see, this is very similar to the BACB requirements because it is based on those requirements, and it includes the content. It includes the practice, the applied behavior analysis part, but also medical courses because the professional actually fits into the medical field, and the program needs to be accredited by the healthcare ministry of the country. Now I will show you how the requirements kind of align with the BACB requirements of today before they move to the sixth edition task list. So as you can see, both require master degree. We are a bit limited because we only take in people from psychology and educational sciences. The 315 hours on the behavior analytic content. The Czech behavior analyst needs to fulfill another 150 hours of allied health content. Concerning the fieldwork, this is 1,500 hours of supervised practice or independent fieldwork, followed by 200 hours of practice within the study program. So we do a lot of BST training to add to this 1,500 hours. And at the end, the final requirement, it's not the BCBA exam any longer because this is not offered in this country anymore outside of the United States. But we have our own Czech behavior analyst oral exam and then practical exam, so persons can receive the licensure in this country. What are the contingencies? Why are people doing that? Why they want to become behavior analysts in this country? It is a recognized profession next to, for example, clinical psychologists or speech pathologists, so it gives the person certain status. It gives you a protection by the law, protection of your clients, but also protection of the professional. and it gives you a possibility to work within the healthcare system, but also the social services, or work privately. The reality in the Czech Republic, however, is as follows. The profession is listed within the law, it is legally recognized, but it is not widely recognized by the other professions. Many pediatricians, psychologists, psychiatrists have no idea that we exist in this country. We are also now in the process of developing our own national certification and licensure system, because we cannot rely on the BACB anymore. So we are still refining our European standards, and healthcare insurance reimbursements are not provided for the services. So we have the profession, but we have not been able to pass the hurdle of negotiating with our Czech healthcare insurance companies the insurance payments. So all the services are paid out of the pocket of the parents. And that also gives us only limited options to work within the healthcare system, because the healthcare insurance are not willing currently to pay for this care or interventions. And that's why most of our graduates are working privately. To establish the legal profession, to establish the training program within our country was an enormous task. And we have had some great support from colleagues from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from Northern Ireland, from the Republic of Ireland, and from many other countries. And I would like to thank you, all of those, not only those on this picture, but many others who have been working with us on this endeavor. And here is my email, and here is also the link to our website of the Center of Applied Behavior Analysis at our university. And I have been talking for exactly 1 hour. So this is the end, and I'm willing to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karel. If there was an audience, we would clap. Thank you very much for a very, very interesting presentation. It's difficult to comprehend the enormity of the work that has been done and achieved in that relatively short period of time since autism was recognized in the Czech Republic and internationally as well, of course, and to be able to actually say that the profession is the profession of behavior analysts is recognized in the law is an amazing achievement, and I think very much credit to yourself and people around you who've led that and have been able to bring the right people over to help with that. I suppose it's you would probably say it's a work in progress at the moment. It's where maybe in America where health insurance are mostly covered, although it's obviously not 100%, but the health insurances cover early intensive behavior interventions. There was a lot, they have achieved that over the last 20 years, and or something like that. And I suppose in the Czech Republic, that is just that's where the process is. But one thing that I think is really important is that within Europe, the Czech Republic is the European Union for sure is the Czech Republic is the only country that actually got that legal protection. The UK is just moving towards that now as well when the BACB extension expires at the end of this year. But so it would be really nice if there was other countries in the European Union, so that a full European coverage can be done. We have Nicola Booth and Dean Reed here saying thank you very much. They really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Ray.
I'm just wondering what are your plans? Yeah, I'm just wondering what are your plans as the next steps, really, because it's very much your talk really outlined the process that has been happening, and the process is not complete until I suppose funding is organized and the profession is properly recognized. How are you going to achieve that?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the question.
Trick question.
No, it's something that I, like
it's really important
I've been
because others can
thinking
learn from
about
that.
for a very long time, and it is a bit like a catch-22, and you are always kind of missing something in the equation, and because your resources and time is limited, you can only focus on one part of the equation in a given time. So, for instance, in the past years, we have focused a lot on the, let's say, legal part of the equation, and because recognizing the profession, getting actually national laws changed so they would add this profession in, was an enormous task, um, with a lot of pushback. And I think now we have to focus on some other parts of the equation. One part of the equation is actually having the profession and the field more recognized by the other professions. We need pediatricians on board, we need psychologists on board that would, for example, recommend the treatment after the screening or after the diagnosis. And actually, that is happening slowly, but we have already some very major diagnostic sites, for example, the University Hospital in Brno, which is doing a lot of the diagnostic work within this region of the country. And many of their patients that go through their diagnostic procedures will then receive documents with recommendations of behavioral treatment, of applied behavior analysis, and actually they would receive my telephone number, or like links to our center. And so this is something that needs to be worked in every country, because you can start with having the profession legalized, but which may seem as a great endeavor. However, if you are not recognized by the other professionals and they would not recommend your services, then the legal recognition, it's empty. So now we are actually
it's like a first step, isn't it? It's not.
yeah. So, and it's hard to say actually where the first step should be, because I know, for example, in Slovakia, colleagues took a bit different route. They do not have a legally recognized profession, but many of the people doing a great behavior analytic work are recognized by other professionals. Psychologists would refer, psychiatrists would refer to their services even without the legal recognition. So I don't think that there is like one step-by-step procedure how to get to the end. And the end is available services for our clients, hopefully supported by some resources from, let's say, from the state or the government, or that are not paid simply out of the pocket of the parents. But there are many roads how to achieve that. So what are we? So getting back to your question, Carola, what I would like to focus on in the following months and maybe years is really having the profession recognized by other professionals and having the profession known within the country. That means organizing conferences, organizing workshops. It means really being visible on social media, having good examples of our work visible, and having or sending our graduates and our professionals within the field of behavior analysis talking in conferences and workshops and of other professionals. It means not going to the European ABA conference or ABAI conference. It means going to the child psychiatry conference and talking about behavior analysis. That is the task that we need to do, as well as negotiating with the insurance companies. But that actually needs a huge support of the consumers. That means parents or other caregivers, because the insurance companies all over the world are typically much more sensitive to what their clients say than what the professionals say. So
I was just going to say the importance of getting the importance of getting the parents involved as advocates, and also, I suppose, as people who demand the services for their children, and then people say, what service are you talking about? And then the explanation comes. Karel, we've got a question here just come up. It's lengthy, so I'm going to just read it out as it comes here. How do you prepare future teachers at the university level to work with children with autism? Do you have courses that focus on teaching children with autism, or innovative methods of teaching people with autism that are embedded in special education or general education programs at the university?
Thank you very much for this question. It varies from university to university. The programs are not similar, are similar, but are not the same. So I can mostly talk about the training program within our university, but maybe a little bit about in general in the Czech Republic. Let's say generally in the Czech Republic, all teacher trainees who will become teachers, and I'm talking about mainstream school teachers now, will receive some training in special needs education. Typically, it would be 1 to 2 courses in their curricula on special needs, and typically that course or two would include some information on autism. So let's say for the general ed teacher, it would probably mean that 1 week in their training would be dedicated to autism and teaching children with autism. That would be the general situation in the Czech Republic. However, here, especially in our university in Brno, in a general teacher training program, we have a bit more courses that elective courses where they can choose and they can get much more information and knowledge and skills on training children with autism. And then we have the special teacher or special education program, which includes courses on autism, which would cover like what autism is, what are like the diagnostic criteria, what are the typical educational programs. However, we also have 2 courses specifically taken from the training program of behavior analysis that are compulsory courses in the special education program now. So currently all the future special education teachers have a course in measurement and course in behavior interventions. We have kind of been able to sneak in those 2 courses into the curriculum, and we are happy for that. I believe the course on measurement is very important, even though the course on measurement does not talk much about autism, but it kind of opens the eyes of the future teachers when they see that the work that they are doing needs to have some results, and that the work that they are doing actually can be measured, and that the fact that they are providing a quality service is visible on the data. So I'm very happy for that course, and actually I'm teaching that course. I was teaching the course today. And the second course is, let's say, basic introduction to behavior analysis and introduction to very, let's say, basic intervention topics or topics on how to use behavior analysis in the classroom. So we have these two courses that are compulsory for all special education teachers.
Yeah, that's really useful, because those will be helpful for all children, not just for kids with autism, but also all kids with other issues, disabilities, or whatever the problem, the issue might be.
Many of them will probably
for the mainstream kids.
Many of them will probably working in the mainstream schools on the position of school special teacher, which is similar to the school counselor in the United States. So they actually, with that knowledge and skills, may have impact on all kinds of children, including children with autism.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Karel, our time is up, I think. We've had our 4 attendance checks for everybody who has attended, and those of you who have not attended this session live can also look at it on demand later on. There are multiple choice questions for you to answer to say that you've actually listened to Karel, which well, thank you so much. I thought it was really, really interesting talk to hear the long history of autism in the Czech Republic as an example of what's happening in Europe. And I think I think you've actually gone a little further than some other countries on some things, and as you say yourself, there are other areas that still need more work. And it'd be interesting to have this presentation again in 5 or 10 years' time to see how things have progressed.
Hopefully.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carola. It was a pleasure.
On behalf of okay, and for everybody else to keep celebrating Autism Awareness Month in April, and that was the contribution from the Center for Behavior Analysis at Queen's. And here you can look at the chat. There some more thank yous for your talk. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, and everybody for attending. I hope you enjoyed that. Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.